welcome to a new episode of Talking Law with me, Sally Penni MBE. I've been working in law for more than 20 years. I'm a barrister at Kenworthy's Chambers in Manchester, the joint vice chair of the Association of Women Barristers, and the founder of Women in the Law UK. You can find out more about the extensive work I do within the legal profession by visiting womeninthelawuk.com, where you can also find countless resources from event listings to webinars to details of our highly successful book club. Speaking of books, I'm excited to tell you there are 2 new books out in the Penny on the Law series, Penny on Employment Rights and Penny on Data Protection. Both are available on Amazon, where you can find the Talking Law book series also. Book 4 is now out, Talking Law and Skills for Future Lawyers. Today, I'm talking with a woman who was born and raised in London, Balham, but who currently lives and works in Washington, D.C., Sandie Okoro, qualified both as a barrister and a solicitor, and is currently the Senior Vice President and General Counsel at the World Bank Group. Sandie is also an honorary bencher of Middle Temple and has received many awards and accolades, including a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Black Solicitors Network at the Diversity Legal Awards. She is named as one of the top 20 global general counsels and holds honorary degrees from several universities. In this interview, Sandie explained to me how her love of the law began at a very young age.
I can't remember a time when I didn't want to be a lawyer. Let's put it that way. I remember watching Crown Court when I was at primary school and thought, I used to go home for lunch and watch it at lunchtime. It's a very old series now, but those of you who are listening can remember it. That was my sort of first influence, and I really wanted to be a judge because I really admired the judges in the series of Crown Court, and so that was where that ambition came from, and I held that very firm, and I still kind of hold it to this day that I want to be a judge. But when I was about 7 years old and I was in primary school, and the teacher was asking everybody what they wanted to do when they grew up, and I was waiting for her to come to me. I couldn't wait because I thought I had a really good answer. Others had not such a good answer, like a princess or a footballer. And I thought, right, I have a really, really good one. And I said, okay, I want to be a judge. And the teacher turned around to me and said, I'm sorry, Sandie, but little black girls from Balham don't become judges. And I thought then, and there wasn't really a gasp or how can you say that? Because those weren't the times. You heard things like that all the time. And so I thought, well, if they don't, then they're going to now, and I'm going to do it. I'm not a judge now. It's still an ambition I hold one day. But I certainly decided that I was going to, make a career for myself in the law, and no one was going to stop me. And sometimes, Sally, I look back and I think, I wonder if I'd said, actually, I'll be Senior Vice President and General Counsel of the World Bank Group instead. She said, that's a much more realistic ambition. I doubt it somehow, but there you go.
Wow. I mean, I'm still aghast at that. The role that you are in is just absolutely amazing. Because previously you held some other sterling, you were General Counsel for HSBC Global Asset Management, Deputy General Counsel then of HSBC Retail Banking and Wealth Management. And then you were Global General Counsel at Barings. And, these are not little roles that one holds. And then you had held several non-exec roles alongside those. But how did you come from that to then becoming Senior Vice President and General Counsel for the World Bank Group, and the compliance role, which is quite a big one because that in itself entails data protection and privacy policies and so on? How did that come about? What made you go for it?
So I always go for it, first off. If someone says you can't do it, that's me. I'm there. I'm stubborn by nature. And I like a challenge. So if often someone says, well, that's not quite for you, or it's going to be too difficult, I'm there. I have loved my career in the law. I have just loved it. And I'm really glad that it's something that I wasn't put off doing. So at first I wanted to be a civil rights lawyer and go in that direction. And then opportunities arose in the city after Big Bang when they separated out asset management from investment banking. And I just thought, oh, let me go for that, because people like me, Black women, didn't tend to go into the city at that particular time. And again, I thought, let me do it. Let me just go there and give it a go. And actually, it was much more welcoming than people would ever have given you the impression that it would be. And this was back in the sort of the early 90s. And so I thought, yeah, give it a go. I qualified both as a barrister and a solicitor, and decided that going into actually private practice, A, would not be easy as a solicitor, and B, probably not what I wanted to do. And I just like the draw of that in-house role where it's a little bit mixture of commercial and being a lawyer as well. And so I went in that route. And I just loved it. And I thrived in that environment. I loved working with fund managers in fund management institutions. It's not for everybody. A lot of change was needed then. A lot of diversity wasn't there, still isn't, but work to do. But I loved that atmosphere. I loved the work. I loved the people. And so I tended to just get my head down and work really, really, really hard. And it took a while for that first big promotion to come, if I'm honest. But after that, the others came, and then I was headhunted, and I moved on, and I was headhunted for this job at the World Bank, which, by the way, Sally, when I was first headhunted, I kind of said, no, I couldn't possibly do it. Go find someone else, as you do, that imposter syndrome. Yeah. Shocker, eh? And then I picked up the phone and thought, no, let the World Bank decide whether they want me or not. Let them choose what they want to do, and not, count myself out. Let them count me in rather than me count myself out. And so I just put my name in the hat, and the rest is history. But, hard work, loving what you do, always feeling you're in the right place. If you feel you're in the wrong place, don't do it. And another thing is, don't do it for the money. Never do it for the money. Okay, do it because you love it. And alongside, I really wanted to contribute back to the legal profession, contribute back to the law, which is why I did some non-exec things and really helped young lawyers, come along, and particularly those from diverse communities, because that's a passion of mine. We need more diversity in the city, in finance, in law, everywhere. And I really want to promote that in a very positive way.
I mean, it's amazing because, I think I'm doing stuff is nothing compared to what you've been doing. So I don't know if you remember, because you've done a great deal of mentoring, like you actually do what you say you're going to do. Great deal of mentoring, from speaking in schools, universities, to the non-exec roles. And I remember a chap that you won't remember, a friend of mine called Gareth Brewerton. And he was saying, yes, oh my God, this amazing woman. I mean, you probably remember all your mentees. I don't. And I've been trying to get you on this podcast for God knows how long. Then you're off to the States and, no longer in London. And I just wonder, where does that passion come from for the mentoring and for the desire to increase, give back, increase the diversity in our profession?
Well, I love mentoring, but I don't actually think of it as mentoring, Sally. I think of it as just talking to someone about my experiences. And if they're of use, they're of use. If they're not, then they're not. Because I found it quite a shocker, actually, sort of maybe about 12 years ago, when, I started to get some profile in the legal press, that anyone was interested in me or my job or my career. I found that very difficult, but I just went to work. I just did my job, and some other things around the side. And then I suddenly realized, it's not that simple. It's actually about representation. It's actually about having role models, and not to take that lightly. So I always said, if somebody were brave enough to say, can I talk to you about your career? I always tried to make that happen. I couldn't do it in every case, but I always tried to make it happen. So I would mentor someone for it was a 1-1-1, I used to call it. One person, 1 hour, just the once. And you can spare an hour, maybe 3 hours a week or something. So I get through quite a lot. I've got through quite a lot of mentoring in my time, and really just talking to people about their careers and trying to, for me, it's trying to, take away that veil of mystery that people have about jobs, trying to make it realistic, trying to give to them what I have learned, whether it's useful or useless, who knows, but making them realize that their own path is different and it is unique. And sometimes helping them say, do you know you're on that wrong path? If that's what you want, this is where won't be where you will get it. And that's happened a couple of times with people I've mentored who suddenly had a light bulb moment. I remember someone at HSBC I mentored who suddenly thought, that's it, they gave up medicine and decided to go back to medicine. And those things can happen when you talk through about what you want in life. And one of the things I say two things, look ahead 10, 20 years time. What do you want your life and career to look like in a really big picture? That thing that might put you on the cover of Time magazine. And then look back, imagine yourself then, and look back, and then what are the things you would regret not having done? And that pretending you're there in that point in time and looking back is so important, because the things we don't do are the things we regret, not the things we do. So I just want to talk to people, get them to, I can do it in groups, I can do it on a one-to-one, but I think that just demystifying some of these things, particularly when you've got a big fancy title and people think, oh, only you could do that. It must be some magic. It's not magic at all. And I just want to demystify that for people. And I get as much out of mentoring and talking to people and finding out their stories. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a unique talent. I find almost as much fun, I think, and as gratifying as I hope my mentees do as well. But I remember Gareth very well.
Yeah, and he's doing brilliant.
He is, isn't he? Yes.
It's so great to hear. Sandie, I set up Women in the Law UK because I didn't see enough role models. And in fact, I remember looking specifically for Black women in law. And there was a wonderful woman called Debo, and she used to have this publication, she's brilliant. And I used to
I know Debo very well. She's a great friend.
Done so much in this area, and done a lot for mentoring and so on. And her publication ceased to exist. It was a physical publication which listed all minority lawyers. But I remember finding you talking about your role and thinking, wow, and then watching this video, which was just about careers, and it was for HSBC, and I thought, wow. And then when you were talking about non-exec roles, and so I wondered if we could talk a bit about that, because there aren't that many lawyers who are vocal about the roles that they have outside of the day job. How did you become a non-exec on a couple of boards alongside your career?
Well, I had always done something outside of my day job. I just always found the time. And by the way, I have 2 children. I'm divorced. They're grown up now, but I had 2 children divorced, one of whom had a disability. So finding time was not easy, but I thought I had to find the time to do it, because it complements what you do in your day job as well, but it's also giving back to society, which is a really important thing to me. So I often sat on many charities, and I first started off even just as I was qualifying, doing helplines. So I was a helpline on the Terence Higgins Trust and things like that, a helpline for women who were facing domestic violence, just answering, so I always did something. And that was, at first that was a couple of hours, a month in an evening, and you were on a rotation. And then I started to get more involved on boards and charities, and I was a school governor as well. I saw you were a school governor.
Yeah.
So I was a school governor of Lara Trait School in Balham, which is a fantastic school Cynthia and Vero went to, the actress. And it was it was an all-girls Catholic school. I was actually asked to be a parent governor. I hadn't put my hand up, but they said, we see that you've got legal skills, it'd be really useful. And so I just got involved that way. It started off very local. It started off with my passions. And then I widened it. I was in a community housing association, all those sorts of things. There's a lot out there that you can do. And I really encourage people to do it. Look around where you live in your local community. There are many associations, there are many schools, things like that, looking for the kind of skills we have as lawyers to bring to the board. They're very particular skills. We're really good on governance. We're really good on detail. Those things are really needed. And often people don't put their hands up. And then as things went on, I got more involved in different things. And that's how then people ask you to join a board. And the same thing happened at the RSC. Leslie Wan, she's a fantastic lawyer. She had this women's network. And it just so happened that the General Counsel for the RSC was one of these evenings, these cocktail evenings. And I said, oh, I love the RSC. I mean, who doesn't? I'm passionate about Shakespeare. I think they're the best arts company in the world. They wouldn't like me saying that, but I really do think they are. Well, let me put it this way, one of the best, okay?
Yeah.
And they're certainly supreme and superlative in what they do when it comes to Shakespeare. And I was just waxing lyrical. A few days later, she just dropped me a line and said, well, they're looking for a new trustee. Why don't you put your name in the hat? And I couldn't believe it. And I put my name in the hat and I was chosen. But that connection would not have been made in that way. And I certainly didn't see the adverts in the press or anything. And I probably wouldn't have put my hat in the ring. So I think who you know in terms of, I don't mean in terms of networking and nepotism, but I think it's really important to not be afraid to say to people what your ambitions are, not to be afraid to voice them, because you never know who's listening in any set of circumstances and where an opportunity might arise. I tend to think as women, we keep those close to our chest. We think we don't want to jinx it. We don't want to say anything. But, you never know. And we really need more representation on boards as non-execs. I think this is so important. And being asked to be the chair of WOW, which I'd always been involved with as a panelist and a contributor. Jude Kelly, who's just amazing, asked me to be the inaugural chair, and I nearly fell off my seat. And I thought, yeah, I've got to do it. Not so easy with the bank job because that's fairly full on, and I really want to give my all to WOW as much as I can. But I thought, I just have to do this. I just have to do this because I'm so passionate about the arts. And this is about advancing women through the arts as well. What a combination. I'm very keen on women's rights and women's advancement and equality and equity. So this was just a magic thing. So it's been a slow progress to get these things. Sometimes, most of the time, I'm asked to do something. When somebody asks you to do something, say yes. Helena Kennedy told me that. She said, say yes.
Wow. She's been on this because I went through a phase of just saying no. And then I decided, you know what? Yeah, I'll just do it. And that is actually great advice. But does that then mean that sometimes we as women are in danger of taking on stuff? Or do you think there's value in somebody saying, Sandie, you'd be great at this. Why don't you? And we should just say yes. I love that. I'm writing that down.
You can't say yes to everything. But at first, when you're, just say yes. I think that was the best piece of advice I've ever had, because I realize now what she was saying was people don't ask you to do something because they think you're going to fail. If you're asked to do something, they do it because they think you're a sure bet. And so people will be seeing something in you that you're not seeing in yourself. But at first you think, I couldn't do that. Why are they asking me to do that? I couldn't do that. And that sort of imposter syndrome, that feeling that you can't do it, that feeling, oh my goodness. But if you're asked to do it, then do it. Be judicious about what you choose when you get asked to do a lot, and make sure it's with your passion and is taking you in a direction where you can make a real impact as well, not just for the sake of it. Never do something just to get your name, just to get a name on the CV. Do what you truly love, because then you'll really actually give something to the institution. But we tend to, as women, I think, no, we can't do that, and just see all the things we can't. We're our own worst enemy. All the things, our own worst enemy here, Sally, because all the things we think that are going to hold us back. And there are real things out there. There are real glass ceilings, there are real barriers, don't get me wrong. But we are our greatest barrier as women, in that we think, how are we going to do all this? How are we going to do all that? Instead of think, just have a go and work it out as you go along and not worry about it too much. And life doesn't have to be perfect. It's okay to be average. It's okay for it to be okay.
I'm having a really profound afternoon. I'm writing that down as well. I've lost track of my list of questions now. Sandie, that's pretty amazing. I read recently a wonderful article, an interview that you gave to the FT. And in that, you talked a lot about imposter syndrome, which I'm coming to. Not a lot, actually, but just its existence and authenticity and resilience in our careers, which are things we don't often talk about, because imposter syndrome, the moment you mention it, people think, oh, well, you're so successful. How could you possibly ever have had it or thought about it? And I felt that the article, it was amazing. I think it got something like 32,000 views or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that article, your article, because it connected with a lot of us, men and women. And the authentic point, which has also stayed with me, I just wondered, how have you remained to be authentic in your own career advancement? And has that been an important aspect for you? Particularly when things like imposter syndrome come and one needs to be resilient and, one's thinking about career advancement and so on and so forth. How have you managed to remain so authentic, really?
It's almost as if I had no choice, really, to choose that. It wasn't in my nature to be anything other than myself. So way back when I was, starting my career in the law after qualifying, and decided that, I want to give the city a go. I got a piece of advice. I've had lots of really good advice in my career and some really rubbish advice, really rubbish advice, like, little black girls from Balham don't become judges. Well, here was another one coming right up where I was told, change your surname because Okoro is too ethnic sounding, and it'll put people, then you couldn't Google or anything else. So when people just saw your CV land, it would put them off. And I thought, that's it. And I was married at the time, so I could have chosen a different surname. And I thought, no, I'm not doing that. I'm an Okoro and I'm staying an Okoro forever. And if you don't like the surname, then maybe you and I can't work together. So don't choose me anyway. And I won't even know who hasn't chosen me, right? You just don't know that. I just know who is. And so that was a very conscious decision, very, very early in my career, not to try and be something else to fit in. I wasn't even having a label of authenticity then. I think it was a bit of stubbornness or whatever, because I said it would really hold me back. But I thought, and it didn't. I then went to work at Schroders picked me up, and then Bearings, and all the traditional lit institutions they said I wouldn't have a place in, I had absolutely a place in. And I think, and then I thought, right, I'm going to do it my way because I'm probably going to be the only person in the room anyway. So I might as well have my own style. I might have my own way of doing it. And if it works, it works. So I've been fairly comfortable in my own skin the whole time and haven't, succumbed to that. Because one of my things, my mum always said to me was, never judge another person until you've walked 100 miles in their shoes. And then very recently, someone added to that, never judge another person until you walked 100 miles in their shoes as them, not as you, but as them. Mm. So you've got to realize, never envy anybody else for anything. You are going to knock it on the head, be 100%. The best at being you rather than a poor imitation of somebody else. Only you can be you. And I think I learned that maybe because of the challenges and working in the city and all of that, I thought I might as well just be me, and instead of trying to fit in, but actually going somewhere where I thought I would fit in as myself. And this is why I'm so keen on diversity, etc. And I've been obsessed with the Olympics. I'm so sad it's over. I'm feeling bereft, actually. But that's all about authenticity. Look at all of that. And many of our wonderful sports women and men who have been talking about this have in effect been saying this, they have imposter syndrome. They were saying, many of you who've had more than one gold medal have said, it's really hard to come and defend that and do that again. So everybody has it. There is no one single successful person who doesn't have it and who doesn't worry, because if they didn't, they wouldn't really be performing at the top of their game. And you just have to keep going. That resilience is my middle name. You need it in sport, you need it in anything, no matter your race, your ethnicity, whatever it is. Nothing is easy. And I've seen this when I've seen the work I've done in the RSC, where, acting is very glamorous and everything. Boy, is that hard work. I have never seen anything so much hard work as it is being an actor, particularly when you're doing, theatre. And so nothing is easy. Everything is resilience and hard work. You have to be at the top of your game. You have to want to be at the top of your game. But you're only ever going to really knock it out of the park if you're yourself, because the amount of energy and time it takes to pretend to be someone else is energy and time you're not putting into the job that you're doing. So let people come and be themselves. It's amazing. I mean, the Paralympics is going to start soon as well. I'm going to be obsessed with that too. But it's amazing when you just look at, someone doesn't say to someone like Adam Peaty, oh, you're a good swimmer, but hey, why don't you try running around the track instead? That's his authentic self as a swimmer. And let's remember that when we look at ourselves. What is your authentic self? You are never going to be that gold medalist equivalent if what your real thing is, your authentic self is in the pool, but someone puts you on the track.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is really, really spot on, actually. I just remember to say that to my kids.
Yeah.
Might be a bit much for them, they're all under 11. Um, and so, Sandie, you've got this big role, and I see that you've traveled a lot. And prior to the pandemic lockdown, you were on the move a lot. You were traveling
Yes.
to all these wonderful countries. How did you find that in this role? And because, of course, well, these are diverse countries, and so you're having to mix in very different communities to an extent. I know you're from London, but going flying halfway around the world, all these different countries. How did you find that in the role, or was that part of the excitement?
Oh, it was definitely part of the excitement, and it was part of the learning curve, and it was part of everything that makes this job probably the best, one of the best legal jobs out there. Obviously, when we call it in the bank, in the multilateral space, going on mission. But when you go and you travel, and we're looking at our projects, we're meeting people, we're meeting the beneficiaries of those projects. Very, very important for the country, and for the people who develop these projects, for people from the head office to come and see. And to understand. But Sally, one of the things that was I remember this so clearly, nearly in everything. And I'm really glad I did a lot of traveling before lockdown happened. So I thought I'm going to pile it in my first few years, not towards the end. I'm really glad I made that conscious decision, because if I hadn't done that in the first few years, I wouldn't be able to do that now. And it's going to take a long time before that amount of travel can be done again, I think, at that speed that I was doing it at. But I realized the impact I had as a Black woman getting out of that vehicle, that UN vehicle, when we arrived. And of course, you arrive with lots of people, security, and you're not dressed up to the nines, because you're doing a lot of traveling. And at first, people aren't quite sure, which one is the VP, who's the vice president here, and then they realize it's you, and you can see sometimes a look of surprise, shock, often delight on people's faces, especially the women. No matter where I went, no matter the community, the women were delighted when I turned up, and they saw it was a woman, and they saw it was a woman that was somewhat representative of them, not the whole time, because that was the last thing they were expecting. So shock, delight, and then they wanted to come and talk to me. And you always had an interpreter if one was needed. And I'll never forget this time when we were in a very remote village in Indonesia. Really remote, up in the mountains. And this lady who just looked like the most interesting woman, you could just tell. But it was a community where men and women were fairly segregated. And I knew she was itching to talk to me. So as we were walking around, she came to talk to me. And it was a classic woman-to-woman conversation, that kind of, even though our lives are so different, we live in very different places, we look very different, we just had such a great chat. And one of the things she said, thank you, World Bank, for bringing, water to, that's what we did, was a big water project. She said when they were discussing it about what do they want first, was it water and electricity? All the men wanted electricity and the women wanted water. And the reason the women wanted water is they went to get the water, right? And it took them 4 hours a day, 2 hours to go and get it and bring it back in the morning, and the same in the afternoon, often with a child on their back. So it gave them 4 hours back a day having water in the village, first. And then with that, they could educate their children. They could spend more time with their children. They could do more. And they were so grateful to that. And I thought, what? It is really important that we listen to all sides of a conversation. We understand all aspects of it. The men didn't get the water, so it was always just there. So it wasn't something they were necessarily aware of. And I think but I'm not so sure that had I been, a male representative of the bank, that she would have said that to me. But that was a learning curve for me. And another one, which I will never forget, was again in a very remote part of the country in Senegal. Amazing women's refuge that I went to, and they were really doing a lot of work to empower women. And this wonderful woman, who I'll never forget, said to me, You have this big job and this big title, and you have a voice. You have to be the voice of those who don't have a voice. We are relying on you. And I thought, wow, never take something like this for granted. If you have an opportunity, because people will ask you when you have a title like this, to say something about, more gender empowerment, more gender equality, more rule of law, more access to justice, then you have to say it and take every opportunity. Otherwise, what's the point? Kristalina Georgieva, who's now head of the IMF, and she was CEO for the bank, said, what's the point of having an important title if you don't do something important? I'll never forget her saying that. And I thought, yeah, that's true. It's not just about the title and the fancy things and the UN vehicles. It's actually doing something. And this is, so since I've been at the bank, I've tried to be the voice of those women who don't have a voice.
Yes. Well, that's a great point to come, because my next question was about what has the bank been doing on gender equality. And so that's, but not just gender equality. I've seen that you've been doing work even on LGBTQ community, in other aspects of diversity. Has that been a conscious decision by you then? Or do you think the bank was sort of going there anyway?
The bank was there big time before I arrived. I have contributed, a nanosecond towards that. They've got a huge gender team that's not part of my team in any way, shape, or form. It's that really makes sure that gender is mainstream through all our projects. We look at the impacts of women in our projects. So this is massive. This is core. That our board wants it. Our teams want it. We recognise the importance of gender 100% in everything that we do. And we also recognise that the impacts on men and women in projects can be very different. And the safety of men and women in projects can be very, very different as well. So that's something we are definitely in our social safeguards framework really ensure. So it's been up and running and fantastic way before I got there. All I did really was help voice that a little bit more in some of the talks and things that I do, so that actually, help our gender team, who are amazing, and our governance team as well, to showcase some of the work that they have done. Internally, I'm actually chair of the anti-racism task force at the bank that was set up post George Floyd's death to look at racism within our institution, within our projects, within our community. So that's something personally that the president asked me to set up and do with a fantastic team as well. You never do anything on your own. There's no I in team. You're always working with amazing people. And we have really been forging forward on that. You have to be very honest with yourself and say, you can't say we don't have racism. Everybody does. If it's out there in society, it's in there. On the inside, but what are you going to do about it? Never going to fix it overnight. There is no one fix, but you need to be taking steps towards that to do the best that you can. So that has been my personal hobby horse, really. I can say a little bit more. We've done a compact with other law societies and bar associations as well, which is on an access to justice avenue, but you'll probably come to that. But these things I feel passionately about. And again, it's just bringing voice and agency for those who don't have voice and agency, or feel they don't have voice and agency.
Yes. Well, I think it's fantastic. And I was only saying what the bank was doing because before you got there, sadly, I don't think I'd heard anything about what they were doing. So from my point of view, and indeed for the thousands that follow your work, really, Sandie, we do all attribute it all to you.
Oh, you shouldn't. You mustn't. You get me into terrible trouble.
Well, I could say it, but as a leader, I noticed you talking about we and the teams and, the teams that you work with and the groups of the bank. And that's quite a sort of collaborative type of leader. And I know you said there's no I in team, but are you that type of leader, the inclusive leader who is very encouraging and supportive of others? Is that your leadership style? Because I didn't hear you saying an awful lot of I did this, I did that, say for that specific project. Have you always wanted to be that sort of leader, that kind of team building type of leader?
I love teams. I like leading, but I love teams, and I like flat structures. I'm not a great fan of hierarchies because I think they can impede creativity and innovation. And I have a really sort of clear view on leadership, and that's one of the things I want to do in the future is write a book on leadership. I've made a few notes already.
Oh, brilliant!
I just need to find time to write it in a publisher. But I would love to do that because I think a unique style of leadership from someone in my position is a different style of leadership. It has to be, really. But I like collaboration. I like working together. And I'm a big Game of Thrones fan. And so I'm going to quote a little bit from that. But, if you have to say you're the boss, then you're not the boss. It's like when, it was said to Joffrey, if you have to say you're the king, then you're not the king. So if I have to say I'm the boss, I'm not the boss. And I think a really successful leader literally does not have to be the boss. They have to lead. They have to give vision and security and a way forward and knowing that you've got their back, but you're also taking them and to places that they haven't been before. And, you're setting them off on that journey, and it's okay because you're there and everything will be fine. And trust is a really important thing, which is not always easy to build and takes time to build. And to get to know your team, I'm a real one. I have quite a big team. I have nearly 170. I think I know nearly everybody other than really new members by name, by face. I've got to meet them all. And you've got to really want to do that and not have this kind of hierarchy, sort of parent-child relationship. Yes, you take the tough decisions. That's the thing. You take the tough decisions. And I remember one of my mentors told me, never take a decision you're not paid to take, which is great advice. Shoot it up. So, actually, I'm paid to take those tough decisions and make those tough calls. They're not easy, let me tell you. But you have to work with the team to give them freedom to grow, to mentor them, to stretch them, but in a safe way. So I love collaboration. I love working closely together. And I think and I've had some great teams in every single institution I have worked at. And the real key is when you leave, do they want you back as their leader? That is a real test. If they're like, goodbye, Saranara, nice to see you, then actually that's your job title. You're not your job title. Someone else can come and have this job title. The question is, when you go, do they still see you as a leader and a leader they would want back to lead them? That is true leadership. And encouraging people to be the best that they can be, and you being the best that you can be too, is really, really important. The title and the fancy office and everything else comes with it. It's all very nice. Thank you very much. But it doesn't mean anything if your team is not behind you and you are nothing without your team. Nothing.
Well, I can't wait for the book. That was my last question. I'm not there yet. What's next? And the question would have been
many things.
Yeah. What's next in book, Judge? But before I get there, I've got one or two questions just before then. I've talked about this big job and the wonderful things you're doing there, and many of us in the law, we know what comes with being at the bar, being general counsel. The reality is it's long hours, so we have to juggle lots of things, particularly if we're women. And so I wanted to ask you about well-being. What do you do for well-being, or what would you like to do, I suppose?
I love the arts. That's my way of relaxing.
Yeah.
TV, theatre, not so much during COVID, so sad. And I hope theatre has the opportunity to get back on its feet, because we really need the arts. We need the arts in every aspect of our life. They hold a mirror up to society. They show you what's going on in a way that nobody else can. And it's very accessible to everybody. So I love the arts. I love my music. I love TV. There's nothing books, I can't do books. So that's my way of relaxing. And I love sport as well. So that's my way of relaxing. I devour those things. Being in DC with the Olympics being on, it was very funny time zone, but I quite enjoyed it because you'd wake up in the morning and see how many medals we'd won, and then you could watch it all on catch up. So I find it such a way to relax, because stress is really a problem. Mental health is really an issue, and being able to relax and get some sleep and not take on those stresses you don't need to take on is so important. And allowing yourself to just enjoy it, switch off, something you can switch off. So mine is the arts, anything to do with that. And I took up walking during lockdown. And I took up walking very early in the mornings so I could call people back in London that I would not normally talk to. And that was a great way of reconnecting. So I actually found lockdown a way of reconnecting with people on a regular basis that I hadn't had the time to do before. So I think just getting some fresh air, doing some walking, some time for thinking. And I am doing something that I've never done before that I'm just loving and doing at my own pace is learning a language. I was rubbish at languages. Rubbish until I started learning Spanish in lockdown.
Wow.
And, so I thought, I want something at the end of this to say that I did. What did you do in lockdown? And I think, right, okay, I've learned a language. So I'm now intermediate in Spanish. And it suddenly clicked. Languages suddenly clicked. And they're now going to be my new thing. I'm always going to be learning a language. There is no time limit, I suddenly realized. It's not like at school, you're rushing towards doing your GCSEs and A-levels in some subject. No, take your time. Learn, talk. I have adored my Spanish lessons. I've adored learning Spanish. I've actually got the confidence now to start speaking a little bit in Spanish to people who are Spanish. And that's the most terrifying thing of all. And of course, there's a lot of it here in terms of the Latino community around. So you see, every single sign and instruction is in a dual language. So it's a tiny bit of immersion. But, keeping your brain alert is really, really important as well, I think, so we don't get bogged down with the in and outs of, our jobs and not letting things overwhelm you as well. I remember once when things were really getting to that point at a certain point in my career where everything was too much. And you feel like you're on the verge of, something not very healthy. And I was walking with my son and he was only 3 or 4. And there was one of those plastic dogs, guide dogs for the blind. And he was standing in front of the dog and he was going, come on, dog, bring it on, dog. And I was getting irritated because I just wanted to get home. And I suddenly thought, you know what? He's having a fight with a plastic dog. Am I doing the same thing? Making some things that are really big, too big, and actually they're quite small. So it became my motto, bring it on, dog. Whenever you think something is getting on top of you, whenever you think it's too much, I stop and I go, come on, dog, bring it on, dog. I can handle it. And suddenly clarity comes and it doesn't feel so bad when you think you can handle it. When you start thinking, I can't handle it, it's going to be really bad. That's when you start going to a dark place. And I think we have to be so conscious of this as well, particularly with stresses, particularly with COVID. People, we mustn't let ourselves or our colleagues or our friends or families go to that dark place. Pick them up, do something fun, do something frivolous. You're worth it.
Oh gosh, I love that. See, my pen, I've been told when this this sound is usually my fountain pen scratching when people say phrases that I really love or mottos. So you have to forgive me if you're listening and thinking, what's that scratchy sound? It's me jotting down these wonderful anecdotes and mottos, really. Sandie, you mentioned that you loved Game of Thrones, so do I, and that Joffrey character was awful. A great actor, but, awful. And I already asked you about your well-being, but I wanted to ask you about books and reading. Do you have a favourite book and that means something to you? And then secondly, a favourite fictional legal character?
I have just come in towards finishing a book by Ibrahim Kendi called How to Be an Anti-Racist. Been doing it for the work I've been doing. I recommend it. It's really, really good. And it's obviously quite American centric, but it gives you such a history of race in America. And it gives you such an overview and makes you question yourself. I mean, I thought I knew things about race. I realized I could write it on the back of a postcard, given some of the books I've read. And I sent that book to some of my friends as well to read. It's a very easy read. It's not a really big book. And I really recommend that. And I've learned so much from that. My favorite work of fiction that I remember I used to devour books as a child, is The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. So I like a bit of horror, but I love storytelling. So a great story is something I love. And The Woman in White was a page turner, and it was a big book and it kept me occupied for a very long time. And it's something I go back to. It's my comfort book when I think, oh, let me read something. that, you know, I'm really going to enjoy, never lets you down. So that's my, if you haven't read The Woman in White, and read it, don't see any of the adaptations, just read the book, is one of my favorite ones. And then another one that I love reading is A World According to Garp by John Irving, who's one of my favorite writers. What a storyteller, what a writer. I mean, if I had that talent, wow, you know. And you know, when you watch movies like Back to the Future and things like that, you often think, you know, if I could go into the past and take something that I know now with me, I'd pretend to be John Irving and steal all his ideas for books. I would take his whole collection with me in my backpack when I went back in time and just, I wrote that. So, because I just love I love his storytelling. Now, fictional legal character, that's a hard one. I haven't really sort of thought about that. But because there are so many, I often find that the real sort of portrayal of these characters is somewhat, you know, it's suddenly they're sort of investigating the crime as well. And actually it's much more, you know, mundane. But let me tell you one that I've really loved recently that I've been watching. And I don't remember the name of the character, but it's the three women in the law firm who do the family law. And it's a recent series on TV. The woman that was in Spooks is one of the lead characters. She's really, really good. And it's the three sisters. You know the one that I mean? I just love that.
I do.
They do family law and divorce law and everything. I thought that character was brilliantly researched, brilliantly done. I like everything, you know, her life wasn't like pristine. It was a little bit of a mess on the side. So I quite enjoyed that and like that as well. But I go back to Helena Kennedy. She's not a fictional character, but I think she has been portrayed in fiction one way or another. So she is just amazing. So real life heroes, I think you need to have. And there's some of the female judges as well that I have met, Linda Dobbs and a few other who encouraged me in my ambition to one day be a judge, but also encouraged me in my career as a lawyer, and have been, wow, we couldn't do what you do. And I'm like, wow, I can't do what you do. And that's been a real leveler as well. So they're the fictional characters and then they're the real characters. And I think they're equally as important. But yeah, I love the clothes she wears as well in that series. Pristine.
Yes, I'm trying to remember the name of it. I think she then ends up being separated, that character.
Yes, that's right.
Yes,
that's
think. Well, I'm sure people listening will be in contact to let you know, including it's a wonderful. I've seen it's a wonderful program, and yes, Helena's been a guest on this podcast, so you are amongst the true leaders in our profession. I want to ask you then, as we approach the end of this podcast, I mean, I could talk to you all day, but this podcast, about advice to younger people entering the law now. Times are tough for people wanting to enter the law. COVID has meant that the number of available training contracts, for instance, for solicitors are less, or paralegaling positions, and indeed pupilages for those wanting to come to the bar. So I wondered if you had any career advice and indeed advice on kind of resilience. Yes.
So firstly, I've got it now. The drama is called The Split, and the character is Hannah Stern, played by Nicola Walker. She's my favorite fictional lawyer. Well, the advice I would give is don't let anybody put you off if that's what you want to do. Right? That's the first thing. Never let anybody put you off. Never even let the finances and the nightmare around that, which was very different for me, by the way, because my bar school fees were paid by my local authority. So finding the finance to finance my way through was not a huge issue. It was an issue, but it wasn't a huge issue as it is now. So I think never, if it's what you want to do, you feel it in your bones, you feel your intuition, then, go for it. Don't let anybody put you off. At the same point, don't just do it because it's what your parents want you to do, right? Because you will hate it. So do it because you want to do it. Do it because you want to give something back. And the other thing is, I mentioned this Law Society's Compact and Forum on SDG 16, which I think is the lawyers' SDG. about, strong institutions. Do it because you've got a passion and you want to make the world a better place. If you're going to be a lawyer, you have to believe in the rule of law and access to justice for all. You have to come in with a really fundamental, I think, belief in that. And that's why we put this Law Societies Compact and Forum together. It was, I was co-creator of that with Penelope Warren, who's just wonderful, a wonderful British lawyer. And we came to the idea, where are the lawyers in this talking about access to justice, rule of law? Let's get the law societies and the bar association together to promote this concept together. So you've got to want to be part of that. I think law's never been a movement per se, but we all go into it because we want things to be better. So it's a vocation. You have to feel that. You must not go into it for the money. You must not go into it for the prestige. You must go into it because you really want to help people and bring about justice. The other thing I would say as well is get as much, like you said before, get as much experience outside. Do take that experience and help others. It's an amazing training you have as a lawyer. The way you think analytically, the way you see things, go and help an association, go and help others and take that skill set there. It will hone your skill set, but it would also help your communities. And I think we owe that as lawyers to help in our communities as well. And the last piece of advice I would have is be your authentic self. Yes, there is a certain professionalism that comes with certain professions like the law and a doctor and, all those sorts of things. But that is about respect for your clients. Never forget that. That's about respect for your clients. When someone is facing the worst things they feel they can say, you've got to turn up looking as if you can help them, right? Not looking as if you've been partying and clubbing all night. So you have to come in with that respect for your clients, but also be your authentic self. Encourage diversity, encourage inclusion. We will only be a better profession for it. It doesn't take away from the profession. It only adds to it. It only makes for better lawyers because your clients are everybody out there potentially. Your clients are just as diverse, as complex. And the one thing we want from our clients is for them to be their authentic selves so we can really help them and know what it is they want. We have to do that too. And inclusion, diversity, equity are so important. It's not about taking anything away from anyone. It's about giving everybody more so we can better serve those that we're here to serve, whatever the capacity. Big shot commercial lawyer, family lawyer, a Hannah Stern, a Judge John Deed, whatever you are, we are there to serve and to use our intellectual capacity to do that. It does take a lot of intellect to be a lawyer. And I don't mean that in exam results and whatever. What I do mean is, you can't have reached your peak at A levels intellectually. It comes a lot later. It comes a lot later. And I know everybody who is a lawyer and has been doing that for a long time will realize what I mean. Yes, that's the entry level into the profession. But you really peak intellectually as a lawyer a lot later in your career where you're just like that. Right. And that happens a lot later. So don't expect to be off the blocks and whatever it is straight away. That happens a lot later with training, with experience, with mistakes. And I don't like the word failure. The word failure doesn't exist in my vocabulary. You learn from everything. But that experience is priceless.
So finally then, Sandie, looking back, what advice would you give perhaps the Sandie who was 20, 21, 22? I think one of the things I said was to try and have more fun because I was always working so blooming hard. So I wondered what advice you might, give your younger self if you were asked that same question.
Well, there are two things. I do love that question, actually, Sally, because I think that evolves as you go through time.
Yes.
So where I am, it does, doesn't it? It does change. So where I am now, I definitely would be worry less and have more fun, right? This doesn't mean not passing your exams and party. That isn't what it means. But enjoy it a little bit more as you're going through it. And take some time for yourself to have fun and enjoy life and enjoy friends and family. I know this is going to sound really weird, but see your parents more. Both mine have passed away now. And I just wish I'd spent a little bit more time with them than I had done. And that's not something you realize until you get a lot older, that you think, oh, wow, I took that all for granted. There's a certain stage in your life where you don't see them very much and you're getting on with your own life. Spend some time with those members of your family you love, because they won't be around forever, and just enjoy that. I think now when I look at other things, I really do think the world will not be the way you think it's going to be. Because when I was starting off, there was much debate about, women in senior positions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and how things would look. And I said about my name. However, when you get to the world changes, look how it's changed just in COVID in terms of working practices. You can't tell what is around the corner. So what I thought my career might look like in my 20s and what I might be doing, so completely different. There is no way I would have thought I would have been doing this job. Just no way, and no way that I would have thought this would be available to somebody like me for whatever reason. So you do not know what's around the corner. We tend to think the present will remain such, and it will always look like this in 10, 15 years' time. It will not. My son is the iPhone generation. So he was born when the sort of iPhone really came into being, and they don't know any different. And most of us remember what it's like not to have a phone with a camera and GPS and all of that. But now we can't live without it. And now it has changed our lives in the way that we operate. And so is technology in COVID. We'd have been lost without it. But remember a time when we didn't have it. And so you don't know what's coming along. All I will say, it's always for the better. It always makes life easier. And however hard it might be now, in whatever position you were in, and whatever group you're in, it will always be better. I'm a great optimist, because things come along and life has always got better. Not for everybody. We must be careful not to leave people behind. Some people have been a little bit static, and particularly women as well, outside of the wealthier nations. They haven't progressed as much, and we must bring them along with us and make sure we don't leave people behind, and that technology doesn't leave people behind as we progress on that. But what is there today will not be there tomorrow. In terms of those barriers, trust me, they won't. There'll be other barriers, but not the barriers you think. That's what I would tell myself. Those barriers, Sandie, that people are telling you will be there, they will disappear. And I'll end with this. So this name thing, when I decided to keep it, when I got the job at the World Bank, I got a personal letter of congratulations from President Buhari in Nigeria, who said, congratulations on your job. And he said, we keep an eye on the diaspora, and we saw this, and we want to congratulate you. And I'm like, wow, he would never have known that if I changed my surname. So there you go.
God, that's amazing. I love that about the name, because it's an ongoing issue for minority students, as the Runnymede Trust have highlighted in numerous reports and about applications. Sandie, I'm sitting here in a black jacket from Hobbs, I think, wearing a brooch, and having been in court this morning, skirt and tight, and you're sitting there in the most colourful top. We've both got pearl earrings on. Yeah. And, you've got some lovely jewelry there. And I think I think we've both got Fitbits or iPhone Fitbit watches. But that's the extent of the similarity, same skin colour. You've got a great sense of fashion, which I'm now envying a little. Have you always had that great sense of, loving clothes? Yeah. It just, you look brilliant.
Always. So my Auntie June, so my mum was from Trinidad, and when I was about 3 or 4, my Auntie June came to visit. She's super glamorous. Those who've met her know. And I just wanted to be like her all the time. And I've never apologized for it. I love fashion. I love dressing up. I love all of this. And I make no apology for it, right? People can love other things. They can love opera, they can love whatever they want. And there's no hierarchy in things you love. Nothing is better than the other. It's just different. And mine is fashion and glamour and all of that. And I just have always loved it and never made any apology for it. And everyone said, there's always a bit of colour when you're around, because I do like to add a bit of colour to things. And you can do it in a very professional way. And that's about being your authentic self, bringing it to the table. And that's one of the things I love at the bank as well, is that you'll see many people who are, in saris, traditional African costume, that they just wear to work there. And I think that is one of the things that we, love about the bank and diversity. And we should encourage that a little bit more. I know it's difficult at the bar. I know it's difficult in some professions, but you can still be super professional and bring yourself. So my thing, it's funny you should notice, Sally, I always have my pearl earrings. They are my concession to formality, and that always pearl earrings, always when I'm working, pearl earrings, just so actually, that's part of the uniform. It is part of the kit a little bit for women, isn't it? The pearl earrings. And I'm
yes, it is.
I always have those in. My lawyer earrings.
Yeah, your lawyer. Yeah, your lawyer. Well, but you're just an example of how we can be lawyers in so many different ways. But it means I'm looking forward to when you do become a judge at some point and going back to wearing black and see. Well, unless of course you're in the Supreme Court, and then you could be just as Brenda and be a bit more adventurous as some of the
with her brooches.
Yeah. Sandie Okoro, thank you so much for coming on the Talking Law podcast. I'm so delighted. This has been one of the highlights of the year for me, because I've been desperately trying to get you on here for so long. It's been wonderful speaking to you and interviewing you. Thank you for all the handy tips and guidance. And I can't wait for you to be back in London, where we can meet face to face and have a longer chat. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
A huge thank you to the incredible Sandie Okoro for talking law with me, Sally Penni MBE. Please do catch up with our previous episodes of Talking Law, where you can hear my interviews with guests such as top litigator Harold Braco from Addleshaw Goddard and the actor behind the barrister character Martha Costello, Maxine Peake. If you've enjoyed the podcast, do share Talking Law with your friends or colleagues. You can also enjoy our other series, the Law and Guidance Podcast, a podcast about law in practice, policy and guidance. You can find me and follow me on Twitter at SallyPenny1, or search for Sally Penni or Women in the Law UK on LinkedIn or Instagram. Don't forget the extensive resources for anyone working within the law available at womeninthelawuk.com. Thank you for listening. Thanks to our production team, Sam Walker and Michael Blades at What Goes On Media.